Good morning, everyone. My name is Madeline Jauregui, and I'm a psychology student from University of La Sabana in Colombia. Community psychologists intend to empower social minorities who have been oppressed by asymmetrical power relations. And what I mean by this is that as a result of power inequality, some social groups have suffered the greater consequences of oppression. Let's see the following diagram. My purpose with this diagram is to show you the relationship between power and oppression. Powerful groups are less likely to suffer the consequences of oppression, but you may ask yourself, what exactly is oppression? Oppression is a state of domination where the oppressed suffer the consequences of exploitation, discrimination, exclusion, and sometimes even violence. Okay, so there is a contemporary social issue that has emerged from these asymmetric power relationships I've been talking to you about, and I bet most of you have heard of it. Here you can see a picture of the southwest border that delimits the frontier between Mexico and the United States. According to BBC News, the number of apprehensions in the southwest border since Donald Trump got to the presidency of the country has been decreasing. However, as you can see in the following chart, since 2016, the number of total illegal alien apprehensions in the southwest border has been increasing again. Since 2017, the federal government has been limiting asylum and separating children from families as strategies to control migration in the frontier. Unfortunately, migrant families and unaccompanied children, most of them passing through the southwest border, have suffered the consequences of policies and harsh migration control practices. The strengthening of the border security can be seen as a violation of human rights, in fact, as over 5,000 immigrants have died in the Sonora Desert. These policies and harsh immigration practices have affected children and families from many countries, including Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico, and so many other countries. Many non-profit and governmental organizations are very worried with this issue. Why? Because it has become somehow a human rights violation issue. And that's why I would like to show you the following diagram. Here we can see the relationship between the degree of power and the degree of affinity with the problematic of different social groups that are involved on what's taking place at the southwest frontier. Therefore, to understand the problematic, we need to look back at the history that has been taking place between the US and Mexico. This history can be divided in three eras. So, the first era happened during the earlier 20s, when the US citizens were having some trouble with the Chinese and Japanese workers. These workers were unable to enter the country due to the promulgation of racist court American laws. For this reason, the North Americans decided to send the scouts to search for new manpower, which was found in Mexico, especially in the occidental part of the country. Later on, the second phase of this migratory history was called the High Tide Era. This phase came with the increment of immigrants coming from Mexico to the United States. So, at the beginning of the 1920s, there were approximately 700 Mexicans living in the United States, whereas in the 1900s there were only 100 Mexicans. The final era is known as the deportation era. So basically, from 1929 to 1939 approximately, in only 10 years, half of the Mexican population was thrown out of the country. However, this wouldn't last. With the Sons of War coming from Europe, the need for one-man power was again filling the streets. This started a new era of migration. This new migration was based on a temporal characteristic. They only accepted masculine immigrants from rural origins. Finally, in 1969, the USA placed the first numerical limitations for Mexican immigrants with the Law, Immigration and Nationality Act. Since then, the limitations has only got more and more restrictive. With this rise of restrictions, it started the undocumented era. In the 90s, a set of laws were introduced specifically to make entrance to the country harder. Basically, non-aggravated felonies became aggravated felonies so that sentences as low as 1 year could end in extradition. After the 9/11 attack, the government signed the Patriot Act. Basically, this gave the government greater power and funding to detain aliens suspected of having terrorist ties. The Patriot Act has caused U.S. citizens to see aliens as enemies more than people in the country. This has created a climate of fear for immigrants. Right now, the President of the United States is facing a great controversy. Why? Because of the zero tolerance policy. So this policy gave the Department of Justice the power to prosecute all illegal adults without exception, without absolutely any consideration. The government of the United States should take into consideration the needs and the process that these immigrants are going through, without forgetting at all the needs and the requirements from its own citizens. However, to do this, they should listen to the activist groups from both sides. Next, what I would like to do is to expose some cases of human rights violations. The first case I would like to expose today is that of the women coming from Guatemala, Honduras, Salvador, and Mexico who are being forced to prostitute themselves and take contraceptives to avoid pregnancy. Now, I would like to talk to you about a case that really moved me. And it's because it shows the kind of violations that are taking place at the southwest frontier. And it gives us an idea of the consequences of these policies and harsh practices that are being enforced by the US government to avoid illegal immigration. So, this 7-year-old Guatemalan girl died after being held in custody for several hours in the US Border Patrol. My intention here was really just to tell you some cases, a few of so many that take place and have been taking place for a long time in the southwest border between Mexico and the United States, so that you have an idea of the human rights violations that are taking place here. To retake, basically we have a relationship between power and oppression. We have minorities who are being oppressed by power inequality and by relations of power that leave them in a disadvantaged position. Therefore, right now in the United States, these alien immigrant persons who are getting into the country are sometimes even getting separated from their families. Children are being left alone without any chance to find their parents. And we have this zero tolerance immigration policy that's leaving illegal immigrants on an oppressive situation. They are basically being discriminated, exploited. They are being on a really disadvantageous situation where human rights are being violated. And somehow the laws of the country are helping to build the idea that immigrants are a threat, so that the citizens do not accept them and increase this climate of oppression for these people. Now, taking into consideration all I've told you in these last few minutes, I would like to ask you to please think, what kind of country are we building? Thank you.